Crop Talk on Market Journal is supported by Nebraska's soybean farmers and their checkoff. Finally today, with an influx of rain across some portions of Nebraska, crop diseases should be on the minds of row crop producers. This week, we had the pleasure of catching up with Extension plant pathologist Dylan Mangel to see what particular diseases soybean producers should be looking out for. Well, when you're on Market Journal, it means we've got some diseases out there, particularly for soybean fields. So I guess, broadly speaking, this year has been a unique one. Kind of walk us through the growing season you've seen it so far.
Yeah, so with the rain showing up, that's when the diseases are going to show up. So this year maybe a little bit more so than previous years as well, because we had that slow start. Those plants were extremely stressed going into that, and they needed the rain, and the rain's definitely going to help the situation out, but it's also going to fuel those plant diseases that have been sitting out there. So one of those in particular has just been some of those dormant seedling diseases that didn't happen earlier in the year, but are showing up now as that water's coming. And in particular, Phytophthora is the one that's showing up now. Talk
to me more about that. What are you seeing out in the fields?
Yeah, so typically those spores will lay dormant. As soon as we get a flush of rain, those will wake up. Those will then move to those plants, and within about 10 days you'll start to see symptoms. And the symptoms you'll see when you go look at those in the field is just a wilted plant. If you're walking along and you've got a row that looks good, and then you see a gap in that row where several plants or a single plant are wilted or starting to dry down, that could typically be Phytophthora showing up, and it's just blocking that water in that plant from moving up. So the plant can't keep up with its water use. And the dead giveaway for Phytophthora is a brown stem that's going to proceed from the soil surface up 2 or 3 nodes. So it'll be a dark brown stem, easiest to identify of the seedling diseases.
Is it fairly isolated when you're walking around scouting for it, or you see it kind of more widespread in a certain area?
Yep, it's going to show up in pockets in the field. If you've got a low area where water may pool, where the ground might stay wet just a little bit longer, that's the best place to scout for it. That's just the moisture is going to last a little bit longer and give it more time to get to the plants there.
One of those things we should be perhaps considering sending in to get tested?
Yeah, you can send those plants into the UNL Plant and Pest Diagnostic Clinic. It's very important to identify for certain which seedling disease you have, so you can select a variety and a seed treatment next year that's going to target that disease specifically.
Not much we can do in season about it?
You know, the best thing you can do in season is just take good field notes so you know where to treat next year.
Yep, good point. All right, something else you brought up to us, white mold, seeing that particularly in northeast Nebraska this year?
Yeah, we're getting calls from growers right now. With white mold, the plants are most susceptible during flowering. So there's that short window, fortunately, so it's not a full season type problem. But if you've got the right conditions while those plants are susceptible, it can really start to show up. And I'm getting calls this year because growers they're irrigating earlier than they had in the past, typically during flowering, which is really before that soybean water requirement picks up a lot. But they need to water because they've got to get that moisture in the ground. There's just nothing there for it, and they might not have the capacity to wait. So those calls are just concerns that they're going to make that problem worse by irrigating. Now with this rain showing up kind of timely, that could make the problem worse as well. So we're seeing it in northeastern parts of the states that are rain-fed, but we're also seeing it in irrigated parts in the center of the state where growers have had a field history of it, and they know that if conditions are right, it's going to show up again.
That is a pretty big impact on yield, I understand.
It certainly can be. Yeah, if you've got those conditions there, if it gets into the flowers, unfortunately, you're not going to see it unless you're scouting very carefully. You might see small mushroom-like structures from the white mold fungus that are going to infect it. But after it infects, around the time of infection, you'll see nothing until later in the season. You'll start to see that rot form in the stem at those flower positions where it was infected. So it's you've got to treat in advance of seeing symptoms, which can be difficult.
Yeah. That's what I was just going to ask you about. One of those good thing to take notes on, and be tracking for an upcoming growing season.
Yep, and if you've got yield maps, you can see, if you know you've had it in the past, you can see where it was, and those are the areas I'm recommending to focus treatments on.
We're going to have you back here on Market Journal on Crop Talk in particular, coming up here in a week or two to talk about some later things you'll be seeing in soybean fields. But what else do you want to share with us today? What are you tracking on the fields?
Yeah, just watching those diseases with this rain coming. We really don't know what's going to get stirred up out there. The plants, they're more susceptible than usual because of that early season stress. So scout those fields, watch what's out there, and take good notes and plan for next season.